From the hype behind the official return of a UFC champion to the career-ending implications for Kamaru Usman, here's everything you need to know about the most anticipated welterweight championship rematch in years. And first is the fact that Kamaru and Leon have a history beyond their championship rivalry. Seriously, this isn't just a rematch, it's a rubber match to decide a trilogy between the two that currently sit deadlocked at 1-1. Leon got the better of the Nigerian Nightmare last time, but their beef began in 2015 before the world knew their names. Kamaru steamrolled Leon with his smothering wrestling all 3 rounds, outstriking the Brit and establishing himself as Leon's arch-rival. It's pretty crazy if you think about it. The two fighters are the only ones to get the better of the other in over the past 25 fights collectively. Since that fateful encounter, Usman became a bona fide superstar because of how dominant his title reign was, but Leon was relatively unknown a couple of years ago, despite putting together a 9-fight unbeaten streak, although now it's pretty unlikely you weren't bombarded with clips of the monumental head kick that earned Leon his title. The shot and the subsequent post-fight interview where Leon yelled, "Pound for pound, headshot, dead," has created so much hype for the trilogy that I wouldn't be surprised if it's the highest-selling pay-per-view event of the year. But even if you had no idea about their history, you can rest assured that this is the most competitive fight that can be made at 170 pounds in the UFC. As crazy as it sounds, the history between the two and the skill set the two possess may not be the biggest selling point of the fight. After all, Leon proved that anything can happen inside the octagon. When there's a champion as dominant as Usman, things can get a little boring, competition-wise at least. The Nigerian Nightmare had beaten everybody there was to beat at welterweight at least once with some devastating finishes on his resume, while choosing to take out fan favorites like Jorge Masvidal and Colby Covington twice each across the likes of George St. Pierre in title defenses and win streak. Even when he was fighting Leon, it looked like another night at the office for Kamaru as he overwhelmed Edwards with pressure and wrestling for all 5 rounds. In the third last round championship finish from the fighter behind on the scoreboards this year, Edwards guaranteed fans would tune into his fights for years to come because a knockout will now always feel a blink of an eye away. This is one of the most important things to keep in mind for the trilogy fight, even though it's hard to forget right now. Usman is a dominant pressure fighter, and it always looks like he has the fight in the bag, so don't be discouraged if Leon falls behind once more. Although something tells me the Englishman is going to come into the fight with much more confidence than the first time, and we may see the solidification of our next dominant champion. On the other hand, Usman could come back completely refreshed and take back what's his. I mean, once he lost the belt, Kamaru felt the weight of legacy lift from his shoulders. It's a lot of pressure attempting to go down as one of the greatest, if not the greatest, champions of all time in the UFC. After he'd crossed GSP's record, Kamaru was on the cusp of crossing Anderson Silva's legendary winning streak, which would have made a very strong GOAT case. And not to mention the hopes and dreams of the Nigerian mixed martial arts and African sports as a whole that rested on him keeping hold of his belt. Props to the former champion, he took that loss from Edwards better than most fighters I've ever seen. He congratulated Leon for pulling off the impossible and seemed very content with his own performance. Usman rightly pointed out that he was beating the heck out of Edwards till he got caught, and there's not much he saw in the Englishman that told him a rematch would go any differently. Edwards had a masterful trick up his sleeve, and he baited Usman perfectly into falling for it. But tricks like this rarely work more than once at the highest level, and the former champ isn't the only one who thinks this way. The UFC matchmakers seem to feel the same way, cause yep, Leon goes into his first title defense as the underdog. Let's take a minute here for everyone who likes to bet a few nickels on their favorite fighters, just try their luck. On account of dominating the fight before the head kick, Kamaru goes into the fight as the betting favorite once more, minus 375 to be exact, while Rocky is his natural state as the underdog at plus 290. That's a tad insulting if you ask me. The odds basically imply that Rocky has a roughly 25% chance of winning, and if you bet $100 on him, you'll get back nearly 300 in winnings. The implied winning probability for Usman goes up to around 85%, which is pretty insane if you think about it. I get making Usman the favorite after the way he controlled Edwards in the first two fights, but this kind of difference feels like it's ignoring some major factors. It's important to consider that this time the fight isn't taking place on neutral ground, it's happening in Rocky's backyard. Changing the venue does more than you think. Obviously, it's an advantage fighting in your home country, especially when the crowds are as fanatic as the English. The British haven't had a UFC champion since Michael Bisping won the strap from Luke Rockhold all the way back in 2016, so you can only imagine the welcome Edwards is going to get and how much that motivation is going to push him. But going to London has more than just crowd advantages for the champ. It's the attitude he's used to training at. Their second fight took place in Salt Lake City, Utah, which is around 1,300 meters above sea level. For those who don't know, that really takes a toll on a fighter's gas tank, tiring them out much faster than they would under normal circumstances. Edwards said he felt like his entire body just shut down after the very first round, and that affected his ability to perform. The way the fight went supports this idea too, because Leon won the first round and took Usman down, but then fell behind as the altitude took its toll. If you ask me, everything points towards the fight being way more competitive than the first one. The two have a better read on each other's fighting styles, and Leon can't rely on a trap to win this fight no matter how well he hides it. Not to mention, the biggest surprise for the MMA world may come after the fight is over and the winner is announced, because, win or lose, this may be Usman's last fight in the octagon. Kamaru hasn't really given any major signs that he's going to be retiring soon, but there are a lot of signs that we may not see him fight for much longer. Firstly, there's the GSP dilemma. What do you do when you've done it all? There's nothing for Usman to accomplish in the sport anymore. He's been the pound-for-pound best fighter in the world, beating every record there was in his weight class, and will go down as one of the best fighters of all time, even if he can't win his belt back. Worst of all, Kamaru has had problems with his knees for years, and recently had to take a lot of time off for a broken hand. At 36 years old, you have to start wondering how long the Nigerian Nightmare can keep doing this without causing lasting damage to his body. And that, folks, is all you need to know before the welterweight clash coming up at UFC 286.